Hello and welcome to Lutherans Alive. This is the program that seeks to tell the stories of Lutheran Christians and our ministries here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. We do this joyfully, believing that God is doing wonderful things through us. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck, your host on the program here, and today's program is a part 2 of sorts. We welcome back Pastor Rich Leseganich, who in our first installment was sharing with us about his recent trip to the Holy Land. Rich, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here again. And when you take a trip to the Holy Land, I guess there's a lot to tell. And so it's easy to fill 2 programs with stories of the Holy Land. And in particular, you were speaking of the great city of Jerusalem. And if memory serves, you were saying that you spent about 4 days there. Is that right?
Yes, 4 days.
And among the other things that you saw there, the Wailing Wall, the Garden of Gethsemane, and also the Way of the Cross.
Yes, the Way of the Cross.
And walking that path, which many believed that was the path that Jesus took as he carried the cross on the way to crucifixion. Could you say some things to maybe conclude your time in Jerusalem, sharing about what that experience was like?
The Way of the Cross was very, very crowded. We almost had to fight our way through. Fortunately, we were in the good hands of our tour guide, and we stayed close to him during that time. But the massive amounts of people, along with the vendors that were selling goods along the way, created just a confusion, an atmosphere of chaos and almost confusion. And so we needed to be real intentional about taking those moments to pause at the various stations of the cross, visiting the chapels. It was a welcome retreat along the way to be able to stop and meditate and hear some of the history about each of those stations. But having the opportunity to travel that journey, to travel that way of where our Lord is believed to have traveled, again, leading up to the cross was a phenomenal experience. We paused multiple times for prayer as a group and to do some reflecting. Another advantage of being able to sort of do this as our own faith community, being able to do that together. And today, when we return back from the Holy Land and we see each other again, we will often recount the Way of the Cross and the journey on that way.
Yeah. And when you actually got to what is believed to be the spot where Jesus was crucified, tell us a little bit about what that was like, how you got to see that.
We spent a short amount of time there, but the time that we did spend there, of course, we can't see exactly the place, nor do we know exactly where that place is. But as we talked about earlier, just to be in that general area, so foundational, so crucial to our faith, being able to just be in that spot. So we wish we could have seen more. We wish we could have spent more time there. But we were not able to do that necessarily. But just the thrill and the honor to be in that particular place was enough to last us for a lifetime.
The cross and resurrection are so very central to our faith. That's it. That's what the Christian faith is all about.
Absolutely.
It's about death and resurrection. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. It's not a legalistic thing, but it's about death and new life, and about the one who did that for us, the one who gave it to us. So it's wonderful. So from Jerusalem now, you had the opportunity to see some of the outer regions, other important historical places important to the biblical account. Tell us about some of those places.
Let's take a few moments to visit the Jordan River, if we could do that. Certainly, baptism is so central to us as Lutherans. And being able to see the Jordan River, which looked a lot different than we had anticipated. It was a brownish green, and the area where we were in was the traditional baptismal sites. And being able to actually go into the Jordan River with other people to do remembrance of our baptism at that particular site. In the midst of the commercialization of it, the gift shop that was there, and the ability to purchase holy water and buying baptismal garments, really, it was the contrast between the healing waters of baptism and what happens in baptism, and the sin of the world, so to speak, that meets there in baptism. So we were able to do some theological reflection there as well, and also to gather as a group and to make the sign of the cross on each other's foreheads with the words, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You are baptized. You are loved. You are special. Right there on the steps of the Jordan River was very meaningful, very powerful experience. And some of us, of course, brought some Jordan River water home with us to use in the sacrament here in the States as we administer holy baptism as pastors.
Were there a lot of folks there at the same time who were doing some of those same things?
There were. So we became a community of water bearers, so to speak, and folks who were in that process. There were some folks among our tour group that wanted rebaptized, and so that was an opportunity for conversation as well. Of course, we don't rebaptize, and so being able to talk with them about what their first baptism means and what God was able to do for them in their baptism.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, what God gives to us once, He gives to us for
Absolutely.
always.
For always, absolutely.
So, yeah. Although that's not a part of our Lutheran experience, it was good that you had the opportunity to do a remembrance.
Absolutely.
of one's baptism
Yeah.
in that spot that is so important. Wonderful. And the natural beauty of the place. Could you say some things about that? You were saying earlier, I guess during one of the breaks, that there is a lot of natural beauty to the area.
There's a lot of natural beauty. So many of the holy sites now have churches or chapels that are built over them or near them, which are also very meaningful. But the land itself was very special to us, being able to just interact with what still remains, what is still there without the influence of construction or the modern day influence. Not that we didn't appreciate the beauty of the churches, because we certainly did, and those provided lots of opportunities for prayer and lots of opportunities for spirituality. But we as a group were much more connected to that which was natural, like the garden, like the water of the Jordan River, those earthly elements that connected us a bit more so than the stone.
And of course, that area around the Jordan River is a little bit of a distance from the city of Jerusalem itself.
Yes, of course. Yes,
So
absolutely. Absolutely.
And other outlying areas that you had the opportunity to go to, what were some of the other places that you had the chance to see?
The city of Bethlehem was another opportunity for us. Of course, crossing through Palestinian checkpoints and being looked at and being checked out, so to speak, by the Palestinians created us at a different world. Truly was different than we had anticipated. Bethlehem today is not well kept. There's a lot of trash on the streets. The buildings are very old. It's not taken care of very well, and so knowing that is where our Lord was, being in that environment was enough for us, but also the disparity of the lack of pride and ownership, so to speak, within the community was stark, was a contrast for us.
Yeah. Let's come back to there. We'll start there, I think, after we take a short break here on Lutherans Alive. We'll be back.
All right.
Welcome back to Lutherans Alive. We're glad you're with us. We're also very glad to have Pastor Rich Leseganich sharing with us his trip to the Holy Land. Rich, before we had to take a break, you were speaking about Bethlehem and the time that you spent there. sort of the general overall condition of the city. Plus, you were talking about going through some checkpoints and the security measures there. Could you just tell us a little more about that and a little more about Bethlehem?
Absolutely. When we approached the Israeli checkpoints, there was a long delay as some of the soldiers came on the bus, and we were asked to show passports, and some of us were questioned at length as to the reason for being there. And our tour guide had told us in advance that, you know, when you're answering these questions, most of the time they know the answer, but they're looking for our reaction. They want to know that we're not coming as a threat. And so it was emphasized to us, of course, to remain calm, to remain peaceful, and to be civil with those at the Israeli checkpoints.
Yeah. And just to be clear, they were Israeli checkpoints.
They were Israeli checkpoints.
And there aren't, so to speak, Palestinian checkpoints on the other end, or at least not ones that you went through.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes,
okay.
They were definitely Israeli checkpoints.
Right. And I was a bit surprised too to hear just about the overall condition of the city of Bethlehem and how it's not well kept. Can you say some more things about that?
Yeah, it's not well kept. Our tour guide was grew up for a period of his life in Bethlehem, and so knew a little bit about the history of that, and talked at length and gave us some warning time of that. So we were perhaps more prepared than we would have if we not had that. But we were somewhat prepared for what we were able to see, but not fully. It's difficult to describe in words because we think of cities today that are not well cared for, and in our own country, but to see that in such a holy place was disconcerting. But we still managed, of course, to bring all the spiritual richness of that into our experience.
What it makes me think of is the fact that so many years ago, Jesus came into the world and it was a mess, so to speak, both figuratively and literally. And even now, sin remains with us and is tainting the whole creation and humanity. And we are still in need of his saving power, his healing power, and that Jesus still comes into places like Bethlehem.
Absolutely.
And to Granbury and to Pittsburgh and wherever people happen to be watching. And that's the whole idea behind the incarnation, and that God comes to the world even though it's a mess.
Absolutely. And there were so many times on the 14 days that we were together where we were able to take moments like that, some moments that were different than we had anticipated, and use that kind of theological spin and being able to realize that this is the world as God created, and our theology applies to all the situations that we are in. So being able to use that among our group was an immense tool for us.
Now, a few other spots to sort of round out your trip. You spoke. You were telling us during the break about heading up to Jordan. Some other spots there. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yes, crossing into Jordan was our least favorite experience of the trip. It was a very, very intense security time. That some of us brought some electronic devices with us, cell phones and computers. And going through the checkpoint there, we were questioned significantly, almost to the point of almost an hour, as to why the different wires. That was a concern of them. Why my personal experience was with an electric razor, and not understanding the significance of the charger for the electric razor, and having to explain those kind of things was certainly not something that we expected. But it took us about 2 hours or so to clear the customs and to get into the city of Jordan, into the country of Jordan. When we were there, it was a 6-hour drive the first day in a very tight, crowded bus. And when we crossed over into Jordan, we immediately entered a very, very poor area. And so our first impressions of Jordan were of the poverty. And it was also during a time where there were some markets taking place, and so there was a lot of selling going on the streets. and a lot of folks approaching the tour bus, wanting to make those transactions. Leaving that very poor area, we were then struck with the immense barrenness of the country and just how much of it is desert land. It took us about 6 hours in the bus to drive to Petra, which was, of course, the beautiful hand-carved place that was lost for many years and rediscovered. And we spent the night in Petra, which was just being in that environment was wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any other spots or good memories from that trip to Jordan? It sounds like you weren't there quite as long.
We were not in Jordan very long. In Amman, which we stayed in Amman one night, just a week or so ago, there was prior to us being there was a demonstration, and so we were able to see exactly where that demonstration was taking place, and so the news of that day was very fresh for us because we were able to revisit some of the things that we were seeing on television and hearing about. We were actually, of course, able to be in, which was certainly knowing the violence that was taking place there. We were in that particular place for that period of time.
But it's a reminder that the tension persists throughout the whole region.
Absolutely.
There among many different neighbors there in that area. But a good trip nonetheless, and you are back safe.
Yes.
And for
absolutely.
that we are thankful. And it sounds like the whole group was very edified and lifted up by this entire trip and all of the sites that you had the opportunity to see there.
Absolutely, and I would encourage anyone who does have the opportunity to travel to the Holy Land, to Israel, to Jordan, to please go ahead and take that experience and not to hesitate, for the safety and the hospitality and the spiritual treasures that are there is worth all of the investment that one would take in making that journey.
And how long was the trip altogether?
The trip was 14 days altogether, so 10 of those days were in Israel, and 3.5 of those days were in Jordan.
And again, this was during Lent.
This was during the Lent of last year.
So, which that can also bring a lot of depth of meaning to a trip like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Rich, thanks so much. We've got another segment yet to come, and we're going to take another short break here on Lutherans Alive, and we'll be back. Thanks so much for staying with us on Lutherans Alive. I'm Pastor Tony Schneck. We're talking with Pastor Rich Leseganich more about his trip to the Holy Land. Rich, as you're home now from this trip, and as you have the opportunity to reflect upon it, what reflections do you have? I mean, you spoke in some ways about the tension. We both talked about the tension that still exists between peoples there. But yet, at the end of our last segment, you also had a word or two to say about the hospitality of the people there. There were some shining moments, perhaps, where maybe a glimpse of hope for humanity, perhaps?
Absolutely a glimpse of humanity. While we were there, had the conversation repeatedly that Israel being a place where, of course, 3 of the major world religions are practiced and exist, how relatively peaceful, and I want to be careful in saying that because there are some who would look upon that, I think, with a different perspective, but with 3 major world religions existing together and realizing that the relative peace and the potential for a lot more conflict that is there is great. And so while we hear about the arguing and we hear about the fighting, the day-to-day life there is is for the majority of the local people getting along and supporting one another in their journey. And so it's not all about the arguing and not all about the violence and the war. It is about religious expression and being able to do that in environments that, by and large, is not as hostile as we might think. And I think one can only experience that by going and witnessing that. And it does bring back a perspective here in this country, in our life, of tolerance, of not always agreements, not always conforming to each other's belief, but being able to live with a spirit of respect and a spirit of kindness toward our fellow human beings.
Are there other ways in which you believe you've been personally impacted yourself? How has your faith been impacted by taking this trip? And perhaps how have the others been impacted? But how are you a different person now that you've taken this trip in your home?
There are some who have said to me, why do you need to go and see these places to have your faith? And my response is, I don't need to see these places, but these places are so much more alive as a result of going and seeing the places. So there's definite value in that. Also, just the ability to know that we have that connection now, that personal connection, and a love for the country, and a love for the diversity that even the country has, and diversity in general. I think it reshapes the world for you in a much larger way. You become a little less centered on yourself and more centered upon all of God's creation and all that God has done.
Although I've never been to the Holy Land, I've been to other places in the world outside of these United States, and it does give you a sense of, in one sense, how big the world is, but in another sense, how small it is. That we're all on this big blue ball together, and God has put us there. And we as Christians believe that we do have a purpose to serve God and to love one another, to love God and to love one another, and that's what we need to be. That's what we need to be doing, regardless if that person across from us has views that are very, very different than we are. That we need to, in some ways, we don't have to agree, but we can respect and care for one another and even love one another despite those differences. It's a good thing to be able to do.
And certainly very grateful to be a part of a wider church, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, with a great commitment to global mission.
Right.
I think there's a pride there, and we need to be more attuned to all that our church does internationally. That we are not the church just in our local communities, but we are the universal body of Christ. And geography does not separate us. It's the love of Christ that binds us. And this kind of a trip just brings that home even further.
Right. So whether you're worshiping in Cranberry or whether you're worshiping in a Lutheran church in the Holy Land, and there are Lutheran churches there.
Absolutely.
We are one in mission, and it's good that we have that opportunity. Have you had some opportunity now, other than being on this program, have you had some opportunity here to share about your trip with the folks back at Hope?
We have. We, a few months ago, had a presentation for the congregation where the folks who went on the trip delivered the sermon and worship, and we also had the opportunity to share slides. We had a display of items that we brought back from the various places. This week, I'll be speaking with our women's Bible study as well, talking about the trip and having the opportunity to answer some questions from those experiences. And just the day-to-day conversations. So many times, as people ask, just in the life of the congregation, those informal conversations about how the trip was, or being able to talk in a Bible study setting about the experience and about a specific site or a specific biblical reference, are all opportunities where that sharing takes place continuously. So although it's been going on a year since we were there, we are still talking about it frequently, and that excitement is still very much a part of daily ministry in the life of Hope, and daily ministry in the lives of those who went as well.
And if there are folks who are watching who would be able to come and visit Hope Lutheran Church Cranberry, they could ask you more about it, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We would love to have conversation with those, and there's at least 5 others in the congregation that will talk their ear off about the trip and would love to share the experience with them.
Are you still running out of room up there in your Sunday school classes?
We are. We recently did a building renovation program with an extended worship gathering space, and now we are looking, hopefully in the near future, of a phase 2 of our building project where we can increase the educational space and those opportunities to make Hope an even larger part of our community of Cranberry.
Right. And when I say running out of room, I just mean physical space.
Absolutely.
I don't mean that there isn't room in the family.
Absolutely. There's always room in the family.
Right.
Always
Good.
room in the family.
You're trying to make room.
Absolutely.
More physical space.
More physical space, indeed.
Wonderful. Rich, thanks so much.
Thank you.
For what you shared today. Thanks for coming on the program. We hope to have you back again sometime.
Very good. Be a pleasure.
Blessings. And thank you for being with us on Lutherans Alive. We know that from wherever you're watching, there is a Lutheran congregation that would be very, very pleased to welcome you. Won't you come worship with us? And won't you come see us next time on Lutherans Alive?